Hello, welcome to December's edition of My Life on the Hill, December 2011 nonetheless, almost another year gone. So I'm going to take you on a few little adventures today, a little bit of festive adventuring I think. We'll probably wander down into the orchard, check out some mistletoe, and give you an idea of how you can propagate your own mistletoe, and then we'll come up and I think we'll give the worms a Christmas present, and we'll finish on an alcoholic note, which is always a good thing to finish on. It's always a good thing to start on, in fact, but we'll refrain from starting because I need to do some climbing and I don't want to come out of a tree drunk. Shall I show you what I've been doing in the meantime? Just a few little cheeky Christmas presents. Something I haven't done for a long time is make some picture frames, and I thought because we've got our little Lily this year, and we've got obviously we've got grandparents that are quite keen to have photographs of their new little grandchild. I put together some picture frames. This is something I used to do a lot of a while ago, or several years ago in fact, and give to folks as presents. And people always seem to really appreciate it. These, in fact, I've made these picture frames from an old bit of elm floorboard. And you can buy picture frames now that are made to look old. You know, they've got kind of pretend holes and stuff in there. And I always think that's a bit of a shame to sort of make something that's supposed to be something else. Whereas these are, very legitimate in the sense that they've been pulled up from a 300-year-old floor from the timber itself is probably 150 years old. Elm like this you can't really get anymore. These fabulous little holes, and it makes for a very sort of really sort of authentic, sort of character-rich picture frame. The only thing with elm, of course, is that it's one wood that always moves. And you'll notice that if elm is used for an old staircase or beams or in the building, they're very twisted. And elm will move slightly, even when it's been in a building for hundreds of years. So you've got to be a little bit careful. So what I'll suggest to people that have these picture frames, they don't hang it over their fireplace because it will move and twist and kind of fall apart, and the picture will fall out. Something like that. So as long as it's not above a ridiculously hot place, it'll be absolutely fine. And the other thing I'll show you actually, which is quite interesting, a new little venture for me, is I've started with some pet chews. I was going through eBay the other day and I was kind of looking at various bits and pieces, and I saw these little sort of Hazel pet chews. And my Uncle Jim now, who's 90 in April, said, "Oh, I'll make some of those for you, boy." So he's cut some hazel and he's kind of rounded off the ends, and just down here I've got these fabulous little sticks rounded off, and I'm thinking I'll probably pop these on eBay and see if folks are interested in buying them. I mean, actually they're organic in every sense of the word. You know, there's absolutely no pesticides put on these. They've come from an orchard just down below us, which has organic status because the apples are harvested and sent to Westons, which we kind of looked at last week. So if any of you guys want to buy any of these wonderful natural pet chews, then email me and I'll send some in the post. Right, so you can get some mistletoe. This ladder's perfect for the job. Interestingly, this is an old post office ladder, so a British Telecom ladder that's probably now 30 odd years old, I'm sure, probably possibly more. But it's got a lovely little wire at the top of it for clinging against a pole, so it's perfect for knitting against the side of a tree. So I'm going to get there. I'm going to say these trees are just inundated with mistletoe. But the interesting thing is that certainly if you're selling mistletoe, the only mistletoe that has any real value is the dark green stuff with loads of berries. And this year there's very little dark green stuff with lots of berries, because we've had such a dry season. The mistletoe itself has most of it, majority of it, is very, very yellow. It's not particularly green at all because it hasn't grown as adequately as it might do on a nice year when there's lots and lots of moisture in the ground. But the mistletoe is a hemiparasite. bit like yellow rattle, for instance, which kind of exists in traditional hay meadows, you know, and it kind of taps into adjacent grasses and suppresses the growth of adjacent grasses and lives off those. But in addition to that, of course, it photosynthesizes, which is exactly what mistletoe does. So it's tapping into the apple tree to get some of its energy, but equally it's photosynthesizing to get the remainder. So it can be a problem, and there are trees in this orchard that have been killed because there's too much mistletoe growing in it. And because it becomes increasingly difficult as the tree gets bigger and older to get the mistletoe out of the tops of the trees. And we've often thought of, you know, people will say, oh, can we come and pick your mistletoe? And that would be fine, but the trouble is everybody always wants to pick the mistletoe that's low down, and also they kind of damage the trees in the process. But this year, mistletoe is fetching a fantastic price, a really good premium at Tenbury Market, for instance. It's been fetching, the best stuff is up to £3 a kilo, which is, you know, which is astonishing. So if you thought a builder's bag, for instance, you could probably get like 30-40 kilos into a builder's bag. So that kind of quantity, what would that be? Sort of 90 quid or something, 100 quid for a bag of mistletoe, which in this sort of instance would take, you know, an hour to pick. So actually, you know, this year it's very good. Doesn't always go like that. Some years it's completely pointless, not much point in picking it. But for the purposes of today's exercise, I'm just going to clamber up here and I'm going to get a fabulous bunch. Liv can take it home back to Cornwall, because there's not much mistletoe in Cornwall, is there?
No, I don't think so.
Not a lot.
Not I've seen.
Not a lot. It's not a plentiful thing in Cornwall at all. In fact, Mandy and Steve, who own the orchard that we're in at the moment, have got friends coming up from Totnes, and they'll be picking the mistletoe this weekend, taking it back and flogging it in nice little tied up bundles up to the market. And you know, they have that gives them their sort of Christmas money for presents. So it's a nice thing for them to do. They come up, party all weekend, pick a load of mistletoe, fill up their transit van. Jobs are good, and Mandy and Steve get rid of some mistletoe, and everyone's happy. No orchard owner really wants mistletoe growing in their trees, but of course, you know, it's part of the kind of natural setting. It's a part of the ecosystem in an old ancient orchard, which this is, and the birds do eat mistletoe berries. You know, undeniably, some of the apples that I've been picking recently for the puree for Lily's tea, and to roast up for the chickens, and for us to have our apple crumbles with. A lot of those apples have kind of got mistletoe berry droppings on the top of them, where the field fares and redwings are coming in, they're feasting on some mistletoe and mixing up their diet, and, you know, off to feast on some of the kind of ashmead kernels next door. So of course the way this stuff really gets spread around naturally is through bird droppings. The birds are landing in the tree, pooing, and the droppings are kind of ebbing their way down the side of the tree. And these berries are very sticky inside. You know, you've got that really kind of pretty grim sort of goo, and the little seed is immersed right in the middle of that goo. So in order just to propagate it yourself, all you need to do is just push that little seed, that gooey seed, into a little nook in the tree, and it stays there, it sticks there, and ultimately that thing will almost certainly grow. The thing about mistletoe is it takes a long time to get to a very small size, you know, really something that big, a little twig. So say this big, this twig growing out of that tree like that would probably be 3 or 4 years old. But after that time, it starts to grow very, very quickly. So those big bushels, you couldn't say they were possibly 10, 12 years old or something like that. There's still some lovely colours around. I mean, it's incredible that we're now approaching the middle of December, and yet there's still some fabulous colour about. And when Liv and I were down in the orchard, there's something I wanted to point out to Liv, and that was this enormous great clump of spindleberries. And spindleberries are absolutely beautiful, one of the rare instances in nature, certainly with indigenous native plants, where you have your orange seed kind of just embedded in this wonderful pink husk. And it's a fabulous bird berry as well. I mean, I've often seen robins and blackcaps are particularly fond of spindleberries. Okay, so I thought what we'd do is I came up to this the other day, and I thought I'll save it to show you guys. I'm going to take out a couple of the wormeries now, because some of the trays in the bottom of the wormeries are so well worked, and I'm going to literally empty them out into this old door, shovel them into a sack, bundle it up, and I'll keep it nice and moist in the sack over the winter, ready to use next spring. So in here, this is essentially the perfect place for wormeries, really, because it's covered, but it's lots and lots of air circulating around each of the units, and it makes that whole system very aerobic, you know, and equally they're sort of out of sight in here as well, because they're not really the most aesthetically pleasing of things. So I'm going to get a couple of these trays now, bring it out and empty it out onto here, get grubby hands in the process. Okay, so I've taken off a couple of the top trays, and you can see how wonderfully worked that is. I mean, look at that lovely soft sheen on there, the best stuff imaginable. And I don't suppose for 1 minute there are very many worms in there at all. We'll soon see how many worms there are. This is the sump. It's kind of full of some material. Equally there are some worms in there also. So, but if I tap this out on here, one of the other things that's quite nice, one of the reasons that it's good to harvest the compost from a wormery if you're only going to do it once or twice a year at this time of year, is because there are very few cocoons in a wormery. So you're not going to be taking those cocoons out, which is essentially the next generation of worms, and transferring them to the garden. And I'm going to keep this compost until next year anyway. You tend to find there are more cocoons in a wormery in the spring and through the summertime. So I mean, I literally haven't seen any in this wormery at all now, and we're in December. It's unlikely that there's going to be much sort of sexual worm activity going on at this time of year. So I'm going to empty out this tray here now onto here, get an idea what it looks like. Absolutely wonderful stuff. And you can see there are quite a lot of lots of eggshell, a few little squash seeds, which of course haven't rotted down. And in actual fact, what will happen is I'll put those into the garden in the spring, and they'll end up growing. So it's almost a good way to start off squash seeds in some respects. But those really hard seeds, they do tend to stay intact. But that's it, really. I mean, if you think this is a fabulous combination of various material from the house. Now this is probably now a plastic bag, but originally this bag would have been put in as a paper bag, and this is the sort of inside of the bag that's been left over. So it just goes to show, even from something that looks that it might be compostable and deteriorate, there's this whole kind of resonance of plasticky stuff on the inside. Now I have to discard that, don't want to put that in the garden. So I'll tap the remainder of this out, and I'll shovel this up and put it into a nice bag, a nice sack. This is one of the great things about gardening, is you can just constantly trialling different things. And this was a lamb shoulder. It would have been born in the field about 800 yards away, and literally we'd have obviously eaten it in some fashion. And the bone, George, one of the dogs, will have kind of enjoyed some of the meat off the bones. The remainder I've put in the wormery to see how well the worms deal with the bone. And it just goes to show, I mean, that bone is absolutely sort of picked clean, but it's very much intact. People often say, can you put bones into a wormery? And of course you can, but the reality is they will still come out in pretty much the same way as you put them in. Okay, so I brought the bag up here. I'm simply going to wrap that compost up, keep it nice and moist. And that's in fact, worm compost, if it's set, it goes bullet hard. So really the last thing you want to do is allow it to dry out. So I'm going to kind of just wrap it up, leave it in the bag, leave it in my little shed here, leave it in here until the spring, and then most of this will get mixed up with some leaf litter and some very inexpensive soil conditioner from the landfill site in town. And that's what I'll use to grow our tomatoes and our other plants that we propagate in containers. Well, it's been 3 months or so, hence we popped our damsons in that vodka and popped it in the cupboard. So I'm going to decant it off now. Now I've got to be slightly honest with you. The reality is I've been decanting it for the last couple of weeks. so there's not a great deal of vodka left in there to decant out, but we'll go through the motions today. And also, because I was going to show you how well the blackberry vodka had come on, and the reality is I've already drunk all of that. Okay, so in here we've got all these damsons, and you can see that the level is somewhat lower than it might be. And the cork's going to come out a lot easier than it did when I first tried to get it out. Interestingly enough. It's kind of wedged its way in. So let's kind of pour this into here now. I'll put an elastic band over this muslin. Hopefully there'll be sufficient room in that glass to hold to the quantity of vodka that we are pouring into it. You won't get a damson that tastes better than that. Do you want to try it, damson, Liv?
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah, I've washed my hands since I've emptied the wormeries.
Oh, glad to hear it. Let's try.
What do you think?
I don't think I'll be driving anywhere soon.
Okay, I mean, Lily's in the background. She's obviously slightly too young to enjoy the virtues of seriously strong vodka, but Daddy, of course, isn't. That's very good. It's very good. Well, this is the end of this episode of My Life on the Hill. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed making it with Liv. I've had a fabulous day, slightly festive edition of My Life on the Hill, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you again, talking to you again in the new year, which will hopefully be as mild as it is now. I mean, it's incredible to think that this time last year we were completely immersed in snow, and these fabulous holly berries behind me had a little mound of white stuff on top of all of them, the few that were left that birds hadn't scoffed. So I'm really enjoying this fabulous mild weather. It makes my life a lot easier and all the other animal life around me. So I look forward to seeing you in the new year. See you next time. Merry Christmas.